Michigan State had a fantastic 2021 campaign, going 11-2, beating arch rival Michigan in a top 10 matchup, winning the Peach Bowl, and just having an altogether successful season was fantastic for the majority of Spartan fans, who had not seen a season like this since really the 2015 season. This was the first time since that season that Michigan State actually got 11 wins. And that was when Michigan State went to the Big Ten championship game, they won it, and they went to the college football playoff. So a very fantastic year for the Spartans, and now the question is, where do they go from here? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Michigan State is placed in a lot of top 15, top 10 rankings. In ESPN's way too early top 25, Michigan State, last time I checked and just looking at it, it was released in May, so just 2 months ago, they're ranked 9th. Michigan's ranked 10th. For perspective, the only Big Ten team ranked ahead of them is Ohio State, who's ranked 2. It's the only Big Ten team ranked ahead of Michigan State in ESPN's way too early top 25, and then in 24/7 Sports top 25, Michigan State is 13th. Yes, 13th. They were previously in the top 10. They were then bumped down. Michigan, for perspective, is at 9. Ohio State is at 2, for perspective as well. So a lot of people are very high on Michigan State. I myself don't have them unranked. For perspective, I have them at 20th. And I think that the job that Mel Tucker is doing is a fantastic one. He is recruiting at a high level. He has signed a top 100 player recently, and he has several 4-stars. I think he has 8 4-stars, 4 3-stars. They're around the 25 range in a recruiting class, according to 24/7 Sports. Mel Tucker's recruiting at a high level. He brought in several impact transfers, like Jacoby Windman, Jarek Broussard, Aaron Brule, Amir Speed, and others. So the team is definitely trending in the right direction long term. We're not talking about the long term here. I think everyone, unless you are blind, can see that Michigan State long term is moving in a positive upward direction. They're getting invested in NIL with what they can. They're investing just in the football program, period. I like the long term. So that's not what this video is about. This is about 2022, because I think Michigan State's a good team. I think that what they have going for them can put them in a position to succeed once again and get double-digit wins. I think repeating last year's season is a possibility, but I think with what they have lost on offense, whether it's Kenneth Walker, whether it's center Matt Allen, Kevin Jarvis, whether it's Jalen Naylor, whether it's that or whether it's some losses on defense, like Jacub Panasiuk, Drew Beasley, I think that this team has more work to do before they can improve off of an amazing 2021 campaign. That's what I'm talking about today. Michigan State still has rebuilding to do. It was evident, especially in the Ohio State game, when Michigan State starters went down in that game, it all fell apart. Michigan State still has depth issues at most positions outside of what I believe would be running back and wide receiver and maybe quarterback. Put in linebacker too and defensive tackle, but still at several positions there are depth issues. The fact that there's tons of depth issues at the O-line is not great, because the offensive line being the foundation of a team, it's important to have depth there, have experience, have great players. If my Michigan Wolverines had issues at the offensive line, if the offensive line was a concern, my opinion on them would be completely different, because especially with their run-focused game, they need a great O-line and one of the best, if not the best, offensive line in the country to possibly win the Big Ten again. That's just the reality of the situation. Michigan State, I like them. The long-term look is good. But I think entering 2022, I don't know. Do you think that this team is capable of repeating last year's season or perhaps improving on it, like some think they are? Do you expect to take a step back? Do you expect them to be about the same? I want to hear your thoughts, especially if you're a Spartan fan. Down in the comments below, type your thoughts, and I'm just going to jump in and start talking about their 2021 team, because I think this is where you'll get some perspective here, and then we'll talk about the expectations heading into 2022, talk about some returning players, mention returning production too, because I think Michigan State's returning production numbers are deceitful, and we will get into that later. The 2021 team was fantastic. It was entertaining to watch. You know, I'm saying this as the guy who watched my team get destroyed by running back Kenneth Walker. This team was entertaining to watch. They were explosive. They were at moments confusing in entertaining ways, like, you know, having some offensive line problems, having some bad moments, and then just completely rectifying them a play later. The team wasn't magical, because I think that takes away the credit that the coaching staff and players deserve, but they were, in a sense, in the most positive sense I can say, magical. When you score 31.8 points per game and allow 25.3 points per game, so you have a scoring offense and defense that are outside of the top 30 in the country, you typically don't have an 11-2 record, which was 11th or tied for 11th in the country, and you typically don't finish 9th in the AP poll. This team was clutch. In close games, this team thrived. In games where it came down to the wire, or where there were some struggles, this team did it. They were the antithesis of Nebraska, I would say. Two very similar teams talent-wise, but Michigan State being much more mentally tough, which has been a theme amongst Mel Tucker teams, regardless if it's his Colorado team in 2019, the Michigan State team in 2020. They're mentally tough. You know, going down to Miami, Florida in September heat and destroying them, coming clutch against Nebraska, coming clutch against Indiana, coming clutch against Michigan. In all three of those games, Michigan State had moments where they could have went into free fall and where their opponent could have reached terminal velocity and shut out the game, and Michigan State didn't let them. So in Miami, Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan, the close games that Michigan State could have lost, and they won. Mental toughness, good coaching, being efficient and utilizing their talent. Purdue was a close game, but it's on the road. It's the game after Michigan, which historically, in a rivalry sense, just in general, and in the Michigan State rivalry sense, typically it has historically been at moments a struggle for Michigan State to go on the road, face a solid team after they play Michigan, and beat that team. And that's something that D'Antonio did very well to get rid of. And I'm not going to say that that's over, but Purdue also has a knack of just out-scheming and being efficient with their talent and beating top 10 teams. Ross-Ade Stadium is a snake pit for top Big Ten East teams. Just look at the Ohio State game in 2018. Michigan State returned home, played Maryland. We're not even going to talk about the Ohio State game. I think that everyone, State fans included, admitted that that's a game that probably should never happen again. Certainly. And the Penn State game, too. A game that Michigan State at moments could have given up and just let Penn State close out the game. And they didn't. And Pittsburgh, again, same thing, and they didn't. So in 6 games where Michigan State could have lost, per se, they won them. It's a sign of mental toughness. Michigan State last year was a demon in close games. They had the 12th strength of schedule, and according to ESPN, they had the 5th strength of record, including ahead of Ohio State, for example, because Michigan State beat Michigan, Ohio State didn't. This team was fantastic. Having Kenneth Walker at running back, who I think was snubbed of at least an appearance in New York City, having 1,636 rushing yards for 6.2 yards a carry and 18 rushing touchdowns behind an offensive line that was outside of the top 50 in most statistical and efficiency metric categories is impressive. That is absolutely impressive. And Michigan State has depth behind him as well. Or they had depth. They had Harold Joyner, Elijah Collins, Jordan Simmons. And their running back room this year, which we'll get into a little later, is one of their strengths. They have a deep running back room, especially with Jarek Broussard, who I think is the best. He's the best player, I think, by a mile in that running back room. We'll get to that later. You had Payton Thorne, too. 3,240 passing yards. He completed 60% of his passes, 27 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 148.1 passer rating. It was Michigan State's best season at the QB position since 2014 or 15 Connor Cook, depending on what you want to debate. He's definitely a solid QB. I think that having him and Walker together last year helped massively with explosive plays because, when you have an elite running back like that and you have a quarterback who's good, who can throw, who can make plays, why do you think Michigan State used the flea flicker so much? You fear Michigan State's run game? You want to devote all your resources you can to stop it? Nope. Ball comes back to Thorne, and he throws it downfield to one of the better wide receiver rooms in the country, whether that was Reed or Naylor or Mosley, and touchdown Spartans. It was a beautiful offense. And the defense, despite the issues at secondary, the front seven was fantastic. It didn't always get pressure against great offensive lines, but when you don't have 4- and 5-star talent, which Mel Tucker is fixing with his recruiting, when you don't have that, it's hard to do that. It's hard to stand up in the trenches against teams that have 4 and 5 stars on their offensive line and have great offensive line coaches, and they just prioritize that. So it's hard. But they were able to get pressure often in moments. They were one of the better run defenses in the country, one of the better ones in the Big Ten. The 2021 team was impressive, to say the least. And that's basically been the theme of this conversation about the 2021 team. Winning several close games. Statistically, looking at the points per game and points allowed per game, you almost wonder, how did this team go 11-2? And it's good coaching, utilization of talent. It's all the things that point to Mel Tucker and Michigan State long-term having success, I think. Getting several double-digit win seasons, possibly winning the Big Ten more than once. I think that he's going to win the Big Ten at some point. How soon? How late? I have no clue. I still view Ohio State as the main juggernaut to conquer. That's the only team that Mel Tucker hasn't conquered out of every other team. He's 2-0 versus Michigan. He can compete with everyone else that he's faced. Every other team that he has played, except Ohio State, he has competed with, or he has conquered and beaten them. Ohio State's the only obstacle right now that he faces, or the only hurdle that he hasn't jumped over. Which leads us into the 2022 team, who has Ohio State at home, and is actually given a better chance by ESPN's Football Power Index, which is a computer simulation that simulates the season, I think, 10,000 times or more to get certain results. They give Michigan State a better chance to beat Ohio State than they give Michigan, which in a certain sense, I vehemently disagree with that, mainly because of matchups, and maybe it is partially because I am a Michigan fan. I doubt that. I think that I have a lot of evidence to support why I disagree with that, but it makes sense because home field advantage is huge. Mel Tucker is undefeated at home, at least going back to 2021, and Ohio State last year, look at the Nebraska game, look at the Michigan game, against teams with just competent defenses and offenses on the road, they had moments where they struggled. And Michigan State will certainly this year have a competent offense and defense. So I can somewhat buy into that argument. They're projected to have an 8-4 record, looking at the Football Power Index, which I think is totally reasonable. That's what I have them going, is 8-4 with losses to Maryland, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. And they're given a 0.1% chance to win out. They're given next to 100% chance to win 6 games, which I completely agree with. I do not see this team missing a bowl game. They're only given around a 4% chance to win the division, 2% chance to win the conference, which I think is pretty reasonable. I have had disagreements with ESPN's FPI before, like favoring Texas to win the Big 12 is just, I think that's asinine in itself, but I discussed that in a different video. And they're ranked 15th in ESPN's FPI, which I think is reasonable too. I like where ESPN's computer system has the Spartans. I have them in a similar position, ranked 20th, but I think that I'm making my own power rankings and looking at that. And Michigan State, despite having lower talent than many other teams that they're ahead of, their efficiency, their coaching staff, the talent and utilization of the portal, it all works in their favor. They returned 72% of their 2021 production, 65% of it on offense, 79% of it on defense. And there is this expectation that Michigan State is going to have a big leap forward on defense, including the secondary, a lot of it because of these returning production numbers. I think they'll improve at the secondary there, but you have to remember these returning production metrics are bloated because it's different when you're returning 79% of your defensive production in your Georgia, where you have Keely Ringo, and I forget the other names. I think it's Tyke Smith or Tyreek Smith, also who transferred in from West Virginia last year to play at Georgia. It's different when you have those guys returning at the secondary versus when you have Chester Kimbrough, Xavier Henderson, who I think is going to be the second best player in coverage behind Amir Speed, Angelo Gross, Ronald Williams. The unit's going to improve, but it's not going to be, there's been no change at coaching staff. There's only one brought-in transfer. You can't expect this unit to become a top 25 secondary. It's not going to happen. The front seven is going to be great, especially at stopping the run. This might be a top 10 run defense with Jacob Slade and Simeon Barrow at defensive tackle. The linebacker room is one of the deepest in the country as well. The offense, of course, 65% of their returning production, but Kenneth Walker, he wasn't all the offense. The people who say that are extreme and extremely wrong. But the people who say that he is going to be easily replaced, and trust me, there are people who say this, Jalen Berger is not even close to Kenneth Walker. Jarek Broussard is great, but Kenneth Walker was just this whole different level. He helped in the pass game, especially play action, because how much people feared him on the ground. He could do, when healthy and having just decent protection, Kenneth Walker would find holes that weren't even schemed into existence. He was an intelligent player, a great player, and losing him, the offensive line, the run game's going to be different. The offense is going to have to function different. Payton Thorne is going to have to have a big leap forward himself if the offense wants to be as explosive as it was last year. The passing game I do expect to improve in film and in gameplay statistically, again, because the play action game, I don't think it will be as good with depth issues at O-line and with having an inferior starting running back, but who knows? I think just that this team, they're an 8-4, 9-3 team. I don't think they're a 10-2, 11-1 team that some people are making them out to be. And at the same time, they're not the 6-6, 7-5 team that some other extremists, I guess is the best term, are making them out to be. So I think 2022 for Michigan State is a team that they'll take a step back. They'll take a baby step or few back, and it will be because of the fantastic year they had last year honestly. Like, the fact going 11-2 with the talent they had speaks to the great coaching staff they have and where they're going in the long term. It's hard to repeat that with few 5 stars and 4 stars on the roster. The transfer portal is a sketchy thing in itself. And by that, I mean, unless you get the really top tier ranked players, you don't always know what you're getting and if they'll fit in. You saw this with Michigan State's secondary last year. Like, chemistry isn't a guarantee. It's not a guarantee with Michigan. I like Oluwatimi coming in from Virginia as a center, but it's not guaranteed that he's going to have great chemistry. He's coming from a completely different school, playing in a completely different conference, a tougher conference. That is, chemistry isn't guaranteed. The talent that Michigan State has, they still have to progress and rebuild. The transfer portal doesn't make rebuilds. At least it shouldn't give the perception that rebuilds don't need to happen. They still do. And Michigan State, I think going 8-4, 9-3 would actually be a very good year, because I don't imagine Michigan State, minus the Ohio State game, because of mismatches there, and because when you're shellacked 2 times in a row, there is always a chance that you now are mentally scared or fear that team. And we'll see if that's the case, or if it's going to really motivate Michigan State to maybe beat that team in this 2022 season. But Michigan State should be competitive in all but 1 and possibly even all 12 of their games. This team is competitive. They have some depth, especially again at D-tackle, linebacker. Their running back room is impressive, even though I think it will drop off because of how great of a player Kenneth Walker was. But Jarek Broussard is impressive. He's a monster. I think that while Jalen Berger, I think, is overvalued, I think Broussard is an undervalued running back. They have a solid tight end room, bringing in Daniel Barker and having Malik Carr there as well. Payton Thorne is a solid QB. I don't think his numbers will... they might take a step back. They might stay the same. We'll see. Again, the offensive line issue, I'd say, is my main concern, along with the puffed-up returning production numbers on defense. Because is it necessarily a good thing when you return 100% of your secondary production, when your secondary production was last in the nation in passing yards allowed, and in the bottom 30 in some efficiency metrics? I wouldn't think so. And I would say the same thing if it was about my team. So I think for 2022, Michigan State's going to have an 8-4 record, maybe 9-3. I'd lean more toward 9-3 than 7-5 if I had to change a game to a win or a loss. And this team is totally capable of reaching 10 wins. I just think it's less likely than maybe some make it out to be. But Michigan State long term, they're on a good path. Watch out for them. No one should underestimate this team. They're not going to fall off in any sense, I really don't think. They'll take a few steps back, but that's different from falling off a cliff and, let's say, going 6-6 and getting blown out in 3 games. That's not going to happen to this team because of the head coach they have, the coaching staff they have overall, because of the depth they have at certain positions, and because at skill positions, which are very important, obviously, they do have good players. If they didn't have good players at skill positions with their offensive line, this would be completely different. But Jayden Reed, Jarek Broussard, Payton Thorne, all of those guys at minimum are solid, and at the best, they possibly are elite, especially referencing Jayden Reed. So those are my thoughts on the 2021 Michigan State football team. I think expecting this team to go 11-1 is probably unrealistic, and I think expecting them to fall off a cliff is also unrealistic. So look for Michigan State to be competitive in all or most of their games, and look for them beyond that in 2023 and 2024 to be, I think, a force to be reckoned with. They're not going away at all. I think that Michigan State is here to stay as a contender under head coach Mel Tucker. If you like this video, make sure to like. Just hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell so you can see when I post content or go live. I'm working on my live streams. I said that they would be up more than a month ago, but it's a whole different process, especially with my currently busy life. But you will see sooner rather than later that I will start going live, and I will let you know about that in my community section. So subscribe if you want to see that. And also comment your thoughts down below. Again, this is all if you are on the YouTube. If you're on Spotify, just follow the channel. Comment your thoughts down below on 2022 Michigan State. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Regardless if you're a Spartan fan or not. I'd love to hear from mostly Spartan fans since this is an MSU video, but comment your thoughts down below on this video and on Michigan State's 2022 football team. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.